place where he said, this is real, this is the faith, and I'm going to serve God. So that whole series of events were instrumental in him, if you will, following the Lord. Now, let's see, I've talked about most of this already. So, I mentioned he galloped back home towards Plymouth, spent several long sessions with distinguished Christians until in December 1808, he dedicated himself fully to the Lord. And I would say he did. 1827, now, this is Burma, but here, I think, is it today Maoming, the name they use for it today, is that correct? I think it is. It drives me crazy when they switch the names, change the names of countries, but anyways, 1827, he moved to Maoming where he continued his work as long as he lived. Now, this is a very abbreviated biography here. When you read about it, when he was first sent out, the ship he was on was captured by the French in some kind of war, and he was imprisoned for several months. Someone got him out of prison, he's back in the U.S. So I'm going to head off as a missionary. He ends up a prisoner in France and gets returned to the U.S. You would think, well, most people would just give up. Not this. How could God allow this thing to happen? If I'm really called, you'd think that's what happened. Then when his original goal was to go to India, but there was so much resistance, the English there wanted trading with India, and they didn't want anybody bringing in a foreign missionary thing, and so he had so much opposition in India that he then, instead of going home, went to Burma. So his original goal was India. His original destination where he ended up was a French prison. Then when getting to India, he leaves India. Of course, while he was there, he got baptized by Carey and lost all his support. Had to scramble for the Baptists to support him after that. And then off to Burma he goes. Now, if you will, the high point, and this is mentioned, and some leave this out, some include it, but I've seen it in several places. The high point, Burma, or Maoman, is a Buddhist country. And when he was there, he spent 7 years before he had his first convert. Part of the reason why anybody who converted to any other religion in Burma, the sentence was death. So if you convert from anything that is not Buddhist, you can be put to death. He actually went to visit the king in another city to ask to change these rules. I mean, you know, how many converts am I going to get if they're worried about the authorities putting them to death for becoming a Christian? King would listen to him. Later, he had a doctor come who worked with him who could do great. The English doctors knew how to remove cataracts. And to the people in Asia, this happened with Hudson Taylor in China also, these were miracle men. And people would line up at the door each day for this surgery. And so this doctor, word about this miracle-performing doctor got out, and he went with Judson translating for him, and then moved to that city. And because the doctor did such wonderful things, the authorities, the persecution temporarily was lifted. So that's how God worked. But even though the Burmese Buddhists were not all that interested in the gospel, there were people living in the jungles called the Karen people. And these jungle people had a tradition that a man with white hair in a book would come and tell them how to get back to their creator. That was part of their folklore. So how did they connect with this? While he is in Burma, I like to call it Burma, Judson, a Christian there, had bought a slave. And the slave was from these wild Karen people. And the slave had been a murdering thief and had been involved in 30 murders. This man, he bought him as a slave. They must have captured him somewhere, made him a slave. He brought him to Judson to, how would I say it, civilize, reform. And his name is Ku Tha Bu, or Bayu. He was a desperate robber bandit involved in some 30 minutes. He converted. And when he realized that this was the promise that his people have been waiting for. This was the man with the light hair, the blonde hair, with the book to tell them the way. He went through the jungles of Burma preaching to all these Karen people, and with great success. So if you look at this, he was also helped by a husband and wife named the Boardmans, and they helped him with this evangelism. It's interesting because he went through 3 wives in his years as a missionary, because his wives kept dying on him and had children. Not some of them. His first wife, I don't think any of the children lived. But the Boardmans who came with them came to help him. He dies. 7 years later, he marries Mrs. Boardman, and I think, I try to remember how many children. I think they had 8 children, it says there. 11 years of marriage, 3 of whom died, but the others survived. Then she died, and then he had a 3rd marriage too. So, you know, you can imagine being on the mission field, and you're struggling, you know, different diseases. They would just get bouts of illness where they were very sick, and deal with that. And losing children was heartbreaking, but he did it. Now, did I list here how many people they actually converted? I think it was something like 11,000 people they baptized. So, off to India he goes, sidetracked to France in prison. Back to India he goes. This not working well there, off to Burma. Burmese Buddhists, not too interested in the gospel. But what do we need? We need a murdering thief to get converted of the Karen people and start a revival in the jungles and win 11,000 people baptized to Christ. So it's you know, the ups and downs of pioneering work were really there. And his courage that he, obviously if I have some other things mentioned here. Now you can see where it is. Now you can see, there's India, not far away. We're used to some of us familiar with the Vietnam War. We're right in the middle there. You hear a lot about Bangladesh. Now today they call it Myanmar. Used to be called Burma. And it used to be called this Malwan. I don't know, they keep changing the name of it. It drives me crazy. But, so, here it is. With 25 years, there were 11,878 baptized Karen believers. All right, so that was perhaps his greatest work. Now I'm going to show a couple of YouTube clips. One has like cartoon characters, but realistic, but it really tells a story well, so I think I'm going to show both of them for you. And we'll be done for tonight. But, yeah, I will mention one other thing. I think it is in the film. His first wife got so sick, he sent her home. She recovered and went across the country telling stories of what he was doing in Burma. And people got excited about missions, about foreign missions. So he used Adoniram Judson's wife to really galvanize thousands of people who would go as missionaries. And this is what you have to remember about this guy. It's not just that he went and 11,000 people were saved, but all the missionaries that he stirred up and is still stirring up today to go after hearing about his life. So that's his legacy, if you will. You know, all that his life produced and the fruit of it. So, where are we here? This is my place. Where am I? There we go, that's it. Now, make sure I got that. Okay.
It was a cold February day in 1810. Adoniram Judson, in his second year at Andover Seminary near Boston, slowly paced the snowy ground in the wooded grove behind the school. One thought had been on his mind for months since he had read a sermon about how the gospel had been brought to India. Should I become a missionary, he thought. The answer seemed to crystallize in the crisp winter air. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. It was Christ's command, and Adoniram made his decision. Several other students in the seminary had also considered becoming foreign missionaries. They banded together in a study group and prepared a proposal to present to the General Association of Congregational Ministers meeting at Bradford. In a clear, powerful voice, Adoniram addressed the assembled ministers. He and his friends were offering themselves as foreign missionaries. After considerable discussion, the delegates voted to set up a foreign mission organization. Judson was asked to go to England to seek financial cooperation and counsel from the London Missionary Society. In January 1811, Judson set sail from Boston Harbor on a British vessel, the Packet. After some days at sea, a French warship intercepted the Packet and captured the crew and passengers. They were taken to France and imprisoned. An American who discovered his plight helped Adoniram slip out of prison under his cape. He made his way to Paris, where he was able to get a safe conduct pass to England. Upon his return to America, Judson met with the Congregational Mission Board and indicated if they would not send out missionaries, he and his friends would go anyway, under the auspices of the London Missionary Society. Thus challenged, the Congregational Board voted to finance the new missionary venture. In 1812, Judson and his young wife Anne, along with another couple, embarked from Salem, Massachusetts for India on the brig Caravan. It was a long voyage. Judson spent the time working on a translation of the New Testament from the Greek. As he studied, he became convinced that immersion was the only proper form of baptism. When they reached India, the Judsons sought out William Carey and his group of English Baptist missionaries in Calcutta. They also sent word back to the American Congregational Board of their changed beliefs and indicated that in good conscience they could no longer accept its support. Soon joined by Luther Rice, the Judsons began planning a joint mission. But the British East India Company bitterly opposed missionary work in India. It insisted that the Judsons go home. But they would not give up. Determined to remain in Asia, Anne Adoniram Judson set sail for Burma in June 1813. Luther Rice agreed to return to America to promote a Baptist missionary movement and enlist financial support. The voyage was a nightmare. Anne became desperately ill, and the baby she was carrying was born dead. When the ship finally landed in Rangoon, Anne had to be carried ashore. They made their way along narrow, crowded streets lined with pagodas. When they stopped to rest, a crowd gathered, curious to see these strange foreigners. Almost immediately, the Judsons were attracted to the Burmese people. Adoniram found a Hindu scholar who could teach him and Anne the Burmese language. Within 6 months, the Judsons had learned enough of the language to converse with the people who passed their house. What was needed was a Burmese English dictionary and grammar. Adoniram began working on one and also translating parts of the Bible into Burmese. The task was enormously difficult. The language lacked many words for the kind of ethical and religious ideas which made up the heart of New Testament Christianity. To compound their problems, sickness was a frequent visitor. Anne had a difficult pregnancy. The baby boy she bore died within 8 months, and Adoniram suffered recurring headaches and eye strain that left his body weak and his spirit depressed. Does God really want me to be a missionary, he asked. Why is the way so hard? But there were enough encouraging signs to pull the Judsons out of their depression. Luther Rice had sent word that the Baptists in the United States had organized a national missionary society to support their work. More missionaries were on their way, and soon a small printing press arrived that would print anything Judson could put into Burmese. Judson built a little zayat, a chapel, beside the road and called out his sermons from its porch. He was encouraged whenever passers-by stopped to listen. Gradually, Judson was able to gather small groups of visitors to listen to his messages. One of these, a 35-year-old man named Mong Na, returned again and again, and soon expressed his wish to be baptized. After 6 hard years, Judson had his first convert. Maung Na was a brave man. The people of Burma were Buddhist, and Burmese law prescribed death for anyone who left the Buddhist faith. Judson knew if he hoped to win other Burmans to Christ, the law would have to be changed. For this, he decided to travel to Ava, the capital city, to petition the king. The trip took a little more than a month, 350 miles up the Irrawaddy River. An audience with the king was arranged, but to Judson's despair, the king would not listen to his message. Judson returned home heartsick. How could he persuade people to accept a religion they might have to die for? Yet people did come, and the little congregation grew despite fierce persecution. One crisis followed another, and in the midst of these, Anne became sick again, so sick that in 1821 she had to return to the United States for treatment. Yet out of this illness, a marvelous opportunity presented itself. As soon as she was able, Anne traveled across the country, telling the people about the work in Burma. Excited by her report, Baptists in America collected large sums of money for foreign missions. While Anne was away, a doctor named Jonathan Price came to help Judson and his colleagues at Rangoon. He was particularly skilled in eye surgery, and his fame for removing cataracts spread far and wide. When the king heard the news about the marvelous foreign doctor, he immediately sent for him. Judson went along to serve as interpreter. This time, the king was friendly. He insisted that the doctor stay and invited Judson to move permanently to Ava. He even asked Adoniram to preach in his presence. This was the opening Adoniram had prayed for. When Anne returned to Burma in the fall of 1823, fully recovered, they immediately left for Ava. Within 6 months of their arrival, war with England had broken out. As foreigners in the capital city, they faced grave dangers. The Burmese were in the habit of killing or enslaving their prisoners of war. As feared, Judson was suspected of being a spy and imprisoned. For a year and a half he remained in prison. At night he was forced to lie on his back, his legs suspended in air and tied to a bamboo pole.
Every night.
Adoniram would not have survived without the aid of his faithful wife. Through gifts to the guards, Anne was permitted to bring food to her husband, then water to wash him. And later she built a private shelter outside the inner prison, which Adoniram was allowed to occupy for short periods of time. Adoniram's major concern was for his New Testament translation, which represented years of painstaking labor. Would this precious manuscript be lost? No. Anne found a way to smuggle it into him, hidden inside a hard pillow. Thus, strengthened by his Bible and by the frequent visits of his wife and new baby daughter, Judson endured the unspeakable filth and oppressive heat of the death prison. Then in November 1825, he was freed. The Burmese needed the help of an interpreter in making peace terms with the English. Adoniram was chosen to do this. Judson decided to return to Ava. Anne, still in fragile health, settled in at Amherst in British Burma, where she set about to start a school and supervise the building of a mission house. But tragedy again struck. Both Anne and the little daughter died. Adoniram was engulfed with an overwhelming sense of grief and loss. Yet he somehow carried on. Other missionaries came to help with the expanding work in Burma. In 1827, Judson moved to Mumain, in Lower Burma, to join another famous missionary couple, George Dana Boardman and his wife Sarah. When George died after an arduous trip to the mountains near the Thailand border, Sarah carried on the work with the receptive Karens. Judson came to admire her greatly. After 6 years, they were married. In spite of all the hardships he faced and changes in life, Judson at last completed his Burmese Bible. With God's word now in the language of the people, he found his preaching and teaching so much easier. 8 children were born to Sarah and Adoniram, but the terrible climate took its toll and only 5 survived. Then Adoniram's own health failed. A throat infection took away his voice, a preacher's most important tool. Undaunted, he continued to talk to people about Jesus in whispers. He continued his writing, working on a Burmese dictionary along with numerous religious booklets. Even though his voice was gone, his pen poured out words to reach the people who were now eager to hear about a loving Savior. Then his wife Sarah grew gravely ill, and in April 1845, he decided to take her back to the United States to regain her health. But on that voyage, Sarah died. Once again, death claimed a loved one. It had been 33 years since Adoniram and Anne had set sail from Salem. Now the famous missionary had returned. People by the thousands came to see and hear him, even though his whispered messages had to be repeated aloud. Then on his way to attend a series of missionary meetings in Philadelphia, a friend gave him a book to read which immediately captured his interest. He wanted to meet its author, a Miss Emily Chubbuck. They did meet, and their friendship grew into love. In June 1846, they were married. A month later, Adoniram set sail for Rangoon with his new wife by his side. Life had not changed much in Burma. The Christians there still had to worship in secret. The families of converts were persecuted, and for the Judsons, recurring sickness drained their strength. After 7 months of dealing with government harassment, illness, and the lack of food and money, the Judsons moved from Rangoon to Moulmein, where the conditions for living and working were more tolerable. Judson preached regularly in a thriving church, but always with an assistant by his side to speak aloud for him. A baby girl was born to Adoniram and Emily on Christmas Eve, 1847. In the year that followed, they spent many happy times together. Their health returned, and Adoniram was able to complete the English-Burmese section of his dictionary. But by 1850, Judson had become deathly sick again. Emily insisted that he take a sea voyage to be free of the suffocating hot air that so weakened him. Surely he would be revived by the fresh sea breezes. Adoniram set sail in April. It was the last Emily would see of him. On April 12, 1850, at 4:15 in the afternoon, Judson passed away. That evening, America's first foreign missionary was buried at sea. Only a few hundred miles west of the land he had come to evangelize 37 years before. His memory has lived on. His work has borne much fruit. Today there are close to 2 million Christians in Burma, 400,000 of whom are Baptists. His life is a testimony to Christian courage and faithfulness. Thousands of missionaries have followed in his footsteps. Let us be thankful to God for raising up such a stalwart servant, who literally gave his life so that others might find his Savior and live.
Those are pretty good. Yo, let me turn the lights back on here.